Hello and welcome to the Loop and Bar podcast, episode 4. Episode 4 now. I'm Kate and I'm coming to you from North Wales in the UK on a very, very sunny day. It's beautiful weather outside. You might be able to tell I caught a bit of the sun yesterday. I've got factor 50 sun cream on today. Yes. And I'm staying inside this afternoon just to do my podcast because it has been about 3 weeks since I did my last podcast, so this is a little bit overdue. So I've got quite a lot of stuff to show you. First of all, if you haven't watched the podcast before, you can find me on. I'll just give you a little bit of information about myself. You can find me on Ravelry as Loop and Bar. I nearly forgot them. Instagram as Loop and Bar, and I'll put it here. That's it, I think. I'm on Facebook, but I don't really use Facebook. I might not be on that for much longer because I don't really use it. So yeah, Ravelry is the best place, and Instagram. Or I've got my Loop and Bar blog, which is www.loopandbar.co.uk. So if you want to pop over and have a look at, on the blog there'll be show notes to the podcast. There'll be some still images, maybe some stuff I don't talk about, sometimes a bit about the garden, but mainly that's in a separate page. And is that it? Yeah. So there might be something a little bit different on the blog, and some past projects that I might not talk about in the podcast because they were quite a while ago. So what have I got to talk about? I've got some finished objects, kind of. What else? I've got some whips to talk about and quite a lot of new stuff to show you. A couple of new podcasts, new to me podcasts, and what else is I'm going to tell you about a film, but only very briefly. I'm not going to talk a lot about a film. I just want to mention a film that I watched, which some people out there might enjoy because it's sort of textiles-y sort of based. So I'll mention that towards the end. Okay. So I'll just start a little bit about, very, very briefly about my, it's not a week, it's a few weeks in Wales, but I think I'll just talk about yesterday. Otherwise I'll be talking for ages. So the weather finally got really lovely and warm. And my friend came round yesterday with her little girl, Olwen, who's 3. And my friend Sarah, she's having a baby in a few weeks' time. So one of my finished objects I'll show you is for her. And we had a picnic. So because I live on a farm, it's on quite a large estate, and there are sort of pockets of woodland kind of surrounding the house and the farm. And we just packed up a basket, bread and cheese and strawberries and really nice little things like that. A couple of blankets, and we walked to the woods where there's it's not high up, but you're kind of on the top of a hill looking down, and it's tree lined, and it's kind of a meadow, but there's a sort of path mown into it, and the bluebells are all out. So we basically sat in the bluebells. We didn't squash any. There's a path and then a clearing, so we sat kind of in that bit. And that's where we had our picnic, and that's why I've got sunburn today because we just weren't expecting it to be so warm and beautiful. So yeah, we had just the most lovely afternoon, really relaxed and very, very long awaited bit of time in the sunshine. So that was really nice. And sort of around doing that, I also managed to cut my grass for the first time, which is a couple of hours of work because it's a really big lawn. It's not a lawn, it's a really big patch of grass. It kind of goes all the way around the house. And the other thing I managed to do this morning was clearing my vegetable patch. of grass, and the grass had grown about this long, this tall, so that was something I've been wanting to do for a long time. So I got my pickaxe, and Charlie and the chickens helped, which isn't very helpful because I nearly chop the chickens' heads off every time, and then she dives in front of them and they all get in the way, and I have to stop and drink my tea. But I finally managed to clear the vegetable patch, so I'm hoping to put peas and beans. I've got some celeriac, some celery. I really want to grow squashes, little patty pan squashes. I tried them last year, but amazingly, because everyone everywhere, anywhere can grow squash or courgettes and have too many, last year I didn't manage to grow any of them. I think it was just too cold. So fingers crossed for this year. Oh, and I've sorted out my greenhouse as well. I've managed to plant some tomatoes and cucumbers in there. So hopefully we'll be able to eat some of our food that I'm growing for us. I'll be in a few weeks. Well, it'll be more than a few weeks, but hopefully the tomatoes will work, because for the past 3 years they haven't worked. They've got blight and fallen off and died. So I'm obviously a bit better at knitting than I am at gardening, but I like to try. So yeah, so I'm a little bit sniffly today because I seem to have developed hay fever, either as I've got older or as I've moved onto the farm. I've been living here for about 3 years now, 3.5 years on the farm. Having grown up and lived in a town, a seaside town, all my life, I now live in the middle of the countryside on a farm, bang in the middle of the farm as well. So I think I'm a bit allergic to it, which is a shame because I absolutely love the farm. But it kind of plays up with my sinuses and makes me sniff and get a bit headachy sometimes, and well, I just have to live with that, so it's worth it though. Anyway, so oh, and I went to see my brand new nephew, Beau, and we had a little party for his sister, Evie, a big sister party to sort of celebrate her becoming a big sister, and that was last week. I would have done my podcast last week actually, but we were there. We were at my sister's in the sunshine, soaking up the sun, playing with giant bubbles in the garden, and eating big sister. I nearly said big sister birthday cake, but it's not birthday, is it? Big sister day cake. It's a one-off. She won't be having that every year. But her mum and dad just wanted to make a bit of a fuss to make her feel special, because lots of the attention goes on the baby, doesn't it, when the baby gets born? So when the baby's born, and Beau's doing really well, the little baby. He's absolutely brilliant. He's fit and healthy and happy, eating and sleeping, and very content little baby. And mum's doing well as well, so that's great. Yeah, so that was my week. It's been really nice. We've finally got spring stroke summer, so that's fantastic. So I'm going to start with some FOs, finished objects. What shall I show you first? There's nothing dramatic, there's nothing drastic to show you here, there's nothing too exciting, but I don't know if you remember in the, I think it was in the first or second episode, which wasn't that far away because this is only the fourth. I showed you my Fidra hat that I was knitting, and I think I'd only done not even half of it. I've finished it, and I have actually dyed it as well. So it is, not only is it finished, but it's a totally different colour. So the yarn I was knitting it in is this Quince & Co yarn. That's what's left of it. In the honey colourway. And I do really like the colourway, but it's not too bad, but I don't think it suited me against my skin tone. It's just a little bit too much on the yellowy side, I think, for my skin tone, which it doesn't, I'm not sure if it really suits me. So, and I'd also I wanted to do a bit of experimenting with dyeing using acid dyes. So I dyed the hat. So there's the before colour, and it's come out very dark. The colour is teal, and it is teal in real life. It's dark, dark teal, but I think it's going to look black when I show it on the camera. I'm just going to move it round, see if you can possibly see any of the stitches. Put it closer, you probably can't. I really like this hat, and it does fit me, but because I've got my hair in a top knot, I'm not going to put it on. I'll maybe put a photograph of it on Ravelry on, so I don't know if you want to see it on, have a look there at some point. But yeah, it's got a really beautiful stitch pattern, which isn't showing up very well because it's this room is just so bright, which is absolutely brilliant most of the time when I'm knitting and working in here and sewing. But for showing dark knitted things, it's not so great, but I don't know, maybe you can see that. No, not really. It's the Fidra hat anyway, so you can have a look at that on Ravelry. There's lots of other people who have made it. Yeah, you can. I think you might be able to see some of the stitches. It's a really, really pretty, beautiful pattern. I think it's a bit. It might actually be a little bit dark for me, for my skin. But I think actually when I've got my hair down in the winter, I've usually got like a darkish grey coat on, like well, it's like a charcoal colour coat. So I think it's going to be fine. But I was really happy with the dye, with the way it dyed up anyway. And that was my first time using acid dyes, so that was really exciting. I actually managed to completely exhaust the dye bath, which is magical, absolutely magical. I was using citric acid. I'll show you the dyes a little bit later on because that's in new stuff. But I used some citric acid as well, and you just put citric acid in and the dye just suddenly just goes out of the water and into the cloth or the fabric, and the water's clear. It's amazing, totally amazing. But yeah, probably went a little bit over the top with the dye there, but never mind. I like the colour, it's fine. So that's the Fidra finished. Fidra. I'm really pleased with that. So it's too hot to wear it though. That will have to just sit nicely on a shelf until the autumn now, I think. What else have I got? Finished objects. Oh, some more hand dyeing. I'm calling these finished objects, kind of, because the sort of project was to actually dye the yarn. One of them I over dyed, and I cannot remember now what colour it was to begin with. It started off as bare yarn, and last year I did some dyeing with natural dye extract powders, and some of that was really successful. The cochineal was really successful. The Persian berry, which came out a beautiful yellow colour, which is, I don't think you can see it, but it's there. That was beautiful. It's a really beautiful buttery yellow, and it seems to be quite colour fast as well, as far as I can tell. It's been there for about a year, so I think it's okay. But whatever was below this, which colour did I over dye? Oh yeah, I think I did. Yeah, I did, because I bought quite a lot of hanks at the time when I bought this dye, and I did some indigo. Woad, and I liked some of the results, but then I kind of was trying to exhaust the dye bath and got some paler results with it, and I wasn't quite too keen on the shade of the blue, and I just thought it's probably not something I'm ever going to use, but the yarn itself is really lovely. So I used the teal. Did I use the teal out of the Fidra hat maybe? I'm thinking I may have, no, because I exhausted the dye bath for that. Oh, anyway, I used the same dye. So basically, the same dye that I used to produce this, I dyed this yarn with. It's a lot lighter. Obviously, the hat was already quite a dark colour, so that's going to contribute to the fact that it came out a lot darker. And I used quite a lot of dye. I haven't put it into a neat twisty hank yet, but I'll just see if I can, yeah, show you the colour. I don't think colours are coming out very well today. on the camera, but anyway, it's a teal, it's like a peacock green, like a teal peacock green, and the yarn is lovely. And I've mentioned it before, I get it from Laxton's. They're in Yorkshire. I've got a feeling that they spin yarn for other commercial companies and sell them, and then the yarn is sold under the brand names as well, which I didn't realise until I heard it on another podcast. I heard the name crop up, but anyone can just buy hanks of yarn. I think you have to buy like packs of 5 hanks. But yeah, it's really lovely yarn. I think this is Falkland Merino double knit. It's really soft. And it dyes really well. It dyes really nicely as far as I can tell. I'm totally new to hand dyeing though, so I don't know very much about it really, but I thought I'd just do some block colours, just saturate the yarn and try and get an even dye, just for my first go, just to see, well, try and get the basics down first before I try going crazy and doing some colour palettes on some skeins, which I might do in the future. Oh, sorry. And then, oops, the other colour I did with, this is a different brand of dye, but it's still an acid dye, so it's a powdered dye, and I used citric acid to fix the dye. Again, it's going to come out really dark, I think, but if I splay it around a bit. This is a deep violet colour. I was sort of intending to get a darker, it looks really dark on the screen, it's actually very, very vibrant. You can sort of catch the colour if I move it around a bit. So wherever you see it appearing sort of at its brightest, that's kind of what the colour is of the yarn. And it is a lovely colour. Just looks black when I do that against my skin, but I think I was going to do some more mittens in that, because I can see the Woodland Tales mittens showing up really nicely with that yarn. And that's the same, it's from Laxton's. So yeah, so some hand dyeing. 3 things I dyed, and I really enjoyed it, so I would really like to get some more colours. I'd like to have a go at doing a few more solid colours, just to experiment with maybe different shades, getting different depths of colour onto yarn. And then I think after that I would like to try, first of all, before I start doing different colour effects on dyes, on hanks of yarn, you know, like tonals, variegated and speckled, because I do fancy having a go at that, but I think I think it's hard enough to get something that you want just in a one solid colour. So I think I'd like to practice with that a little bit first. And I'm thinking I'd like to play around with mixing the colours in the powder form before putting it into the dye bath, and that's probably just normal. That's probably what you do to mix the colours. But yeah, I think I'll get like a colour wheel or a colour mixing guidebook. I should know it. I have got the basics because I actually did used to. I've got an art degree, and I did used to run an art shop for a university. So I do know the basics about colour mixing, but I haven't done it for a while, and it's really good to have a colour wheel or a chart and some reference. And actually, if you're using different mediums, then the results can vary anyway, so that'd be fun. So that's what I'm intending to do in the future. But yeah, hand dyeing finished object. What else have I got to show you? Yeah, you've seen these before, but these I've just done 2 new ones. Actually, one's a whip. I'll sneak it into the FOs. Actually, this is a whip as well, kind of. I haven't put the buttons on. It's nearly a finished object. But I've done another tiny baby Puerperium cardi. This is in linen. Drops. Oh, what was the yarn? No, I haven't got it. Right, I'll put it here. But it's drops linen. Oh, there's a word. Belle, I want to say Belle. It might be Belle, drops Belle. It's linen, something and something. The main fibre in here is linen, and I've done it in It's kind of a really pale silvery grey. I think it's called silver, the colour, but it reminds me of silver birch. It's like a bluey silvery grey. And that's for my friend Sarah, the one that came around at the weekend yesterday, because her baby's due in a few weeks' time. And it's going to be warm. But yeah, I think I've said this before. My friends who've got children have told me that cardigans are helpful at any time of the year round. So I thought I'd still knit her a cardigan, but in linen, so that it was nice and cool. So baby can wear it during the day, hopefully. And I've got some rainbow buttons. When I say rainbow buttons, they're different. They're not got rainbows on them. They're just like red, blue, yellow, orange, colours of the rainbow. But one side they're like a flower, and the other side they're plain. And we don't know if she's having a girl or a boy. So I'm actually waiting until she's had the baby before I give her this. Because if she has a girl, I'm going to put the buttons the flower side up. Simply because it would be a shame not to use them the flower side up, because that's actually what they're supposed to be used that way up anyway. If she has a boy, flowers probably aren't the right thing to put on a boy's. I don't know, that might be, maybe that's fine, but people will think she's got a girl and that will just be confusing. So I'm going to flip the buttons over and use them the plain colour side. So I'm just going to wait and see. It's only a few weeks away, so I'll just be patient before I put the buttons on. Because if I can use the flowers, I would like to, but I don't want to put them on if it's a little boy, because I don't want Sarah going around having to tell everybody that she's actually got a little boy if it's a little girl. And can I show you this? It's a whip. What else have I got for finished objects? Oh, okay, well that was a whip in there. Oh, I'll just show you it because it's the same thing. I'm doing her another one. This is a whip. It's sneaking into this section. Mixing it up a bit, sorry, a bit confusing, but I'm doing her another one because I really love knitting these Puerperium cardigans. They are so cute and they're so fast to make. And this, well, I think I've got a bit addicted to making them. And well, you know, I've got two people in my life who are having well, one's had a baby and the other's having hers, so I might as well take the opportunity and knit some really quick things. There's a good sense of achievement actually in knitting baby stuff because, yeah, you get through it really quickly. So this is the other one. This is for Sarah as well. I've got a colour, oops, it's on a circular needle. I've chosen a colour out of my stash. This is just some stash yarn, and it's like a spring greeny, yellowy colour. So perfect for a girl or a boy, I think. And it's actually acrylic. I don't know which one it is. It's either Stylecraft double knit or bonus. I think it's called bonus. It's one of those, you know, it's one of the budget yarns. Cheap and cheerful yarn, really colourful. They've got loads of colours under the sun. One of the most important things, well, I think for my friend Sarah, is she's quite a busy lady, and I honestly think the last thing she would want is to be given something that she's got to hand wash. So, washing machine, 40 degrees, no problem. And yeah, I think she'll like that. And it's really soft, it's super soft. So that's the whip in the finished object. I've kind of gone over into whips already, but I've got another finished object to show you. Oh, and that's the one that's going to have the donkey buttons that I showed in the last, I'm pretty sure I showed them in the last podcast. So I won't show them again, will I? Just in case you didn't see them, I've got one in here. But the donkey buttons, because Sarah's got donkeys, there's one of them. I think I've showed you these already, but anyway, there they are again. It's not very well in focus, but they're the cutest buttons in the whole wide world. You can see a much better photograph of those buttons on the blog, if you want to, or on Instagram. I've put them on there as well. And that whip's living in my project bag that I made a few weeks ago. So yeah, I need to get on with that because I keep thinking, oh, I've got ages to finish it, but actually she could really have her baby within the next couple of weeks. So I'll get that finished. I actually did another Puerperium, the same cardi, exactly the same, but with little bird buttons for my nephew, and he's got it. But that was in, I'll just show you the yarn quickly because this is such lovely yarn. It's the first time I've ever used it. It's Cascade 220 Superwash. Again, I'm picking yarns that the mums can wash. In the washing machine, and the colour's called Turtle, which is such a cute name for a colourway, and it's just the most beautiful colour. And what I really love about it is it's very slightly, now is this the right word, melange, I don't know what that means, but I've got a feeling from what I've read somewhere that it means there's a little bit of darks, kind of, there's a bit of variegation in the tone. What am I talking about? I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, it's got flecks of slightly darker of the same colour in. Excellent English, Kate, well done. That's what I love about the colour. I love those colours that are sort of a little bit more alive. They're not just completely a solid block colour. I love it if you've got a tiny bit of variation in the tone. I'm really drawn to those sorts of colours. So yeah, that's that. And there's the label. Yeah, you can wash that at 40 degrees in the washing machine as well, so Cascade. Ooh. Cascade Superwash, double knit. That makes a really lovely little Puerperium cardi. And the buttons have gone, hang on, I might have one left. Keep my buttons, some of my buttons in here. Got this little basket from a charity shop, a little nest of them. There were 3. Oh, here are the buttons for the first cardigan. This is what I was talking about with the flower on. Oh, can you see them? So they've got a flower on one side. Bit hard to see. And then on the other side, I'll show you the pink one. Some of them are white on the other side. On the other side, it's just plain colour. So very girly on one side. I'll just see if I've got another one. Oh, do you know what? I don't think I have. I think I used them all up. The bird buttons. Anyway, can't even remember where they were from. Bar Ramu. Yeah, the bird buttons were from Bar Ramu. They're beautiful. So if you want some little tiny clay cute bird buttons, go and look on Bar Ramu website. It's a wool shop in Leeds. It's a brilliant wool shop. Yeah, they've got some really lovely buttons, and I might have talked about them on the last episode, can't remember because it's ages ago. sorry if I'm repeating myself. Anyway, I'll put it in the notes. And right, what's my next? That was Puerperium. Oh yeah, next whip. I feel like I'm rushing through this a little bit. I'm very aware that Avion is going to, he's gone out for the afternoon farming, working. But he's coming back to help me move. We've got an old Freelander. It used to be mine, and then I got a new car because the Freelander was just way too big and expensive for me to just go backwards and forwards to work in. Just didn't need that, so I didn't trade it in. The Freelander wasn't really worth anything. It was worth more to us to keep on the farm and just use it around the farm than it would have been to try and sell it. So we've just kept that on the farm, and I got myself a new car, just a small little runaround car. But the Freelander is now actually just completely packed in, and at some point somebody probably towed it with the tractor up onto the bit of grass where my washing line is, just outside the house. And it's been sat there for about 4 weeks, which is really annoying because 1, it's in the way of my washing line, and 2, I can't mow the grass underneath it now. So we've finally got around to trying to move it yesterday, and the handbrake has just completely locked. Well, the handbrake comes off, but the car's just locked in position. The brake is locked on it, so it was quite hilarious. Avion was trying to push it and I was trying to kind of get it to move. We couldn't move it, so he's coming back with a tractor. He said he'd give me about an hour and a half. But I faffed around for ages trying to get everything ready to do the podcast, so I haven't got an hour and a half at all. And now I'm wasting time, so I'm just talking about the Freelander. But Avion's coming back very soon, and he'll probably want me to help him to move this Freelander out of the way. So I might have to do a stop and then start again later, and then that means I'm going to have to do some serious editing, more than I've ever done before. Anyway, we'll see. That's why I feel like I'm rushing a bit. Anyway. So, next whip is the remake rug. I showed the rug a couple of episodes ago, so it seems like a really long time now. It's probably about 5 weeks ago, and it was a round crocheted rug. And oh yeah, and then I think I showed the rug unpicked, and I just had these long lengths of wool yarn, which is this. And it's in a basket here. Oops. I'm keeping it all in just a big basket. It's just living in there. That's the biggest project bag ever. There's the crochet hook. I've talked about these before, so I won't bother giving the details. It's in I don't know, a couple of podcasts back if you want the details of this, or it's on the blog of where I got all of the stuff. But here it is so far. So I wanted to make a square rug. I wanted to make it closer, the stitches closer together. What I didn't like about one of the things I didn't like about the previous rug was that it was too holey. The stitches were too loose. I didn't really like the shape actually, after all. It didn't fit anywhere in my house. And also the lengths of yarn had lots of, the strips of wool had lots of lengths of string connecting them, and I didn't like that because they ended up with lots of loops of white string hanging out of the rug. So I've sorted all of that out. I took a long time stitching the lengths of yarn together into one massive long piece of yarn, and then I just couldn't wind it. It was impossible to wind it, so I just dumped it all in the basket. I did it in 3 colour blocks, so I sewed together all of the blue, then all of the yellow, then all of the pink, because I just wanted three blocks of colour in the rug, rather than it being stripy, which is what I've done the round rug in. And here it is so far. Do a close-up for you. So if I pull it apart, you can see there's actually, it's a really, really lovely dense, there we go, just pull it like that. It's a really lovely dense fabric. It's really squashy and lovely to sit on. And I think I'm doing an okay job of getting straight sides, which is a relief. Avion, I tend to sit and do this in front of the TV because I don't have to, obviously there's no pattern, I'm just crocheting and doing single crochets. I don't have to concentrate except to just make sure I go into the right stitch at the very beginning. Apart from that, I can watch anything on the TV while I'm doing this. And Avion watched me the other night and said he thought it looked really clumsy because you obviously have to kind of really push the crochet hook. It can be a bit difficult getting the crochet hook into the stitches. But I don't mind that because it means I get a really nice dense fabric. I think he just thought it looked clumsy. Probably does a bit, but I like the big chunkiness of it and I really enjoy working on it. And it goes really quickly. Technically I could have done a lot more, but I've been working on some other stuff which I hadn't really planned on starting, but I have started, so that's coming up further along in the whips section. Anyway. So there's the rug, it's coming on. The next colour, there's still quite a bit of the yellow to go. I'm thinking the yellow is going to make up the same amount as the blue did, and then on top the pink will go next. But I'll stop taking it all out the basket because it's going to tangle it all up. I've just laid it in the basket quite strategically, just so I can sort of crochet with it easily and it doesn't get tangled up, so I have to try not to move it around too much. So that's the rug. I'm really pleased with that. I'm definitely going to use it in the living room when it's done because I like it a lot better than the one that I had before. I've got a cold drink today. I had tea, but I've drunk it all when I was getting ready to do the podcast, so which is actually better than trying to drink it during the podcast because it always goes cold anyway. So, oh, I forgot to show you my project bag. I've just told you what it is now as well. I've got another finished object to show you that I totally forgot. This is a bit crazy, mixed up podcast today. Never mind, it doesn't matter, does it? As long as you see it all. Another finished object. Just roll back a little bit to FOs. Sorry, just forget I started showing you whips for a minute. I got a sudden urge to make a new project bag because of a whip that I'm going to show you in a minute. What have I got in here? I think I've got the Andrea shawl, which I've mentioned already, but I made another project bag. It's a drawstring one, and I worked out, I had to look up on Pinterest how to do this, how to make it drawstring from where you can hold both sides like that and pull it, which is brilliant, because on my other drawstring bags here, I made this before I knew how to do that. So it's only got drawstring on one side, which is okay. I still really like that. But this is brill. This is even better. And it's just a plain, like a really nice linen fabric that I got from one of our big fabric shops. And this is a bit of vintage lace. It's only on one side, the lace, because I only had a little bit of it left. I've had this years. I don't even know where I got it from. I might have got it when I used to be an art and design technician in the textiles department of an art college, and I think I got it at that time from somewhere. So that's quite a few years ago. So I've had this lace for a long time. I showed my boss, and she thinks it looks like Nottingham lace because she comes from Nottingham. So we googled it, but we couldn't find anything that looked like that. But it's quite sort of boho, sort of vintagey lace. Anyway, I love it. And then the inside is just, I think this is some Tilda fabric. I got a few fat quarters of Tilda fabric from my friend's shop a while ago, and they've just been sitting in my stash. So it's just a really pretty, sort of just a quilting cotton type, cream and blue. So that's a really simple one. I won't do it on this one because it's stitched now, and I'll ruin the inside of it if I do it on this one, but I really, really fancy having a big K on the front of my next one. So I think my next one's going to have my name initial on it. Bit like when you were little and you had your initials on your pee bag, which is where the inspiration for my project bags came from. So yeah, maybe my next one will have my name, just the first letter of my name on it. So that was a finished object. Back to whips. Okay, so the thing that I'm keeping in that project bag is the Andrea shawl, which I showed you the yarn a few weeks ago, a couple of episodes back. So now I've started it. I only just started this a few days ago, actually. Despite having had the yarn for a long time. I was waiting for my needles to arrive because I've got new needles, which I will show you in a minute. And also I got distracted by another shawl entirely, which I will talk about in a minute as well. And so the original shawl project that I was going to work on just kind of got not forgotten, definitely not forgotten. But had to wait in the queue a little bit. And this, actually, now that I've started knitting it, I love this pattern. It's very addictive. So it's called the Andrea shawl. It's on Ravelry. I think it's a paid for pattern. I'll put it here, but there are some details about it on the previous podcast as well. So I just don't want to repeat myself too much. So here's the start of it. I'll just show you that. I put it against the table. Oh, I'll do a close-up. It's in, the yarn is the Uncommon Thread, which is not showing up at its best. show you the cake. Making a bit of a noise now. There it is caked up. So as you can see, it's tonal. Is it tonal? It's tonal. It's really beautiful colour. The colourway is called Attic Room. I actually meant to order the colourway Toast, but put in Attic Room by accident. But when it came, I really loved it, so I've kept it. I'll show you the skein, just in case you didn't see before. There's the skein. Skein? So there it is in its skein. Yeah, I got 2 skeins of that, so I'm hoping it's going to be enough. And on Ravelry, there's a lot of versions of this. And most versions, I think, have got 2 colours in. So the border is knitted in a contrast colour to the main body of the shawl. My plan is just to knit it all in this colour, but I'm sort of think there is another colourway that would look really beautiful with this, like a very pale grey, creamy grey. And I'm slightly tempted to make it a 2-tone one. Or maybe I'll just do this all in one colour and then do another one in 2 colours. But perhaps I should finish this one and my other shawl first though, before I start planning yet another one. How can I show you this better? Let me get a piece of paper. I don't know if it'll work, but I'll see if I can show you it better against the piece of paper. Sorry, that might be really noisy. Probably won't work at all. No, doesn't focus well. I need a new camera. I need an actual camera. I do my podcast on my Apple Mac. I can never remember what it's called. On my Apple Mac, just using Photo Booth. So it's great when you get started if you don't have any more equipment, but it's, yeah, it doesn't focus on things very well. That shows it quite nicely. The drape of this yarn, oh, it's so beautiful. It's actually, now that I'm knitting with it, the yarn is a little bit more rustic than I thought when I held it in the skein. I don't know how to say that word. If anybody can tell me, that would be brilliant. But now I'm knitting with it, it does feel slightly rustic, but it's not itchy in any way. It's soft. It's absolutely perfectly fine against the skin. It's not itchy in any way. And I like that. I like that texture, and I like the feel of the yarn. It's one of the things I really love about it. So, and you've got to start by knitting the edge. I think this is the bottom edge. So it's just over halfway there. I've got about nearly that much again to knit. Oh yeah, that looks really, yeah, you can see how pretty it is if I hold it like that. And then as I think you've got to knit there's a border portion which will be knitted that way. Not sure, anyway. A really pretty border portion, and then you knit some stocking stitch for the body of the shawl. So, and the colour is turning out really beautifully. I love this yarn for this pattern. The stitch definition, absolutely brilliant. You can see all the different little twists and bumps and eyelets that are being made, and the colour is showing up really nicely as well. They just work really well in harmony, so I couldn't be more pleased with the choice of pattern and yarn on that particular shawl. So really addictive, and when I finish my podcast and after we've moved to Freelander, I'm going to do some more of that. I'm going to sit outside and do a little bit more of that. And so my next whip is, where is it? Behind me. Okay, now this is the thing that sidetracked me from starting my Andrea shawl. I should have started the Andrea shawl a few weeks ago, but I got completely sidetracked by this next whip that I'm going to show you. I'll show you the yarn first. I bought 4 skeins altogether. I'm nearly at the end. Oh no, I've got quite a bit of it left. So yeah, I'm still on the first skein of it. And this is the yarn. It's called Sulka Nina. Oops, there's the tag. It's called Sulka Nina. And it's 60% merino, 20% alpaca and 20% silk. And it's really, really beautiful and soft. I love the colour. I'm sure that there was a colour name when I ordered it on the internet, but on the card it just tells you the shade, which is 7101. But that's probably not very helpful to you because I don't think you can really see the colour very well on the camera. I don't know, it's coming over okay. It's slightly how do you call this? Variegated? It's got slightly different colours actually spun in, so it's not, the colour effect isn't achieved by the dye. The main colour in this is sort of this beige, grey beige, and then if you look really closely, which you won't be able to see on the camera here, you might be able to see on my Ravelry pictures, I'm not sure. There are quite a few other colours literally spun in, so there's little tiny, very subtle hints of oranges, purples, blues, which sounds crazy for me. That's just not what I would, on paper I wouldn't choose that, but they're so subtle that they just make the yarn look, give it that sort of live look, if you know what I mean. Slightly variegated look. So it's a really lovely yarn. There's a little bit of a halo to it. And the project that I'm knitting with it is the Canopy Shawl. And I've wanted to knit the Canopy Shawl for quite a while. And I was just about to cast on the Andrea Shawl. I was a day or two away from casting on the Andrea Shawl when I saw Melody's podcast from Mandarines, and she announced her Shawl Cal, which is she's doing throughout May, so the Spring Shawl Cal. And all you have to do is be a member of her Ravelry group, which I am, and choose one of her shawl patterns and knit it throughout May. I could absolutely not pass up the opportunity to do that because I've got the Canopy Shawl in my favourites, in my kind of queue on Ravelry, so I thought, yeah, I'm going to do that. So I bought the yarn especially. I didn't have that in my stash. I looked around, I hunted around for the yarn that I wanted. I didn't use the yarn that Melody recommends, and I don't regret it because I do really love that yarn, but the yarn that Melody recommends for her pattern is much smoother. It's actually a bit slightly heavier weight as well, I think. Although I did get sport weight, which is what she recommends. But the yarn that she's knitted hers in hasn't got that halo, so the stitch definition, as I've now discovered, it's really important really to choose quite a smooth yarn if you're going to do the canopy. In my opinion, that's what I think anyway. Because I just think that the stitch patterns, which are quite intricate, aren't showing up as well as I know that they can, because of the yarn that I've chosen. So once I finish this, if I do another canopy, I'll definitely be doing it in a different type of yarn, and probably the one that she recommends because it looks so beautiful on the picture of on her photographs. There's a lot of these on Ravelry though. What made me carry on with this yarn was I did look on Ravelry. There was one point where I thought I was going to frog the pattern, the whole thing, and get different yarn. But I looked around on Ravelry to see if anybody else had used a similar yarn, and there are a few canopies where people have used yarn that's got alpaca in it with a slight halo, and actually the end result was actually very nice, so I've just decided to carry on with it. And it's so soft and it's so lovely to work with. I just wanted to carry on with the cal and carry on knitting it in this yarn, and I am really happy with it. So here's what I've done so far, and I've seen people do this on podcasts before, and I've actually thought to myself, how could you have forgotten to knit to the end of the row when you know you're going to show the project? And I've just done it myself. I was making lunch earlier, and I put a quiche in the oven, and my job was to wake up Avion at 1 because he had a little sleep. He had to get up at 4:30 this morning. He worked until about 11, came in, went to bed about 11:30, try and get an hour's sleep. And my job was to wake him up for it, and And I was making him his lunch as well. Well, us lunch. I was cooking as a quiche. So I was concentrating on thinking about the time, and the oven beeper was going off as well to tell me the quiche was ready. And then I had to get up and get Avian for his lunch, and that's why I forgot to knit to the end of the row. I have knitted to the marker though, thankfully, so I know exactly where I am in the pattern. I've done a lot of pulling back and re-knitting of this. The pattern is really lovely to work with, but it requires, for me, a lot of concentration. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who wouldn't need to concentrate quite so much as I do on this, but I have to literally sit at my desk. I can't watch a podcast, I can't have the telly on, I can't do anything other than just knit and concentrate and knit slowly on this. But look how far I've got, which is quite good for me. It's my first ever shawl, because I started this one before the Andrea, so technically the Andrea was going to be my first ever shawl, but technically now this is my first ever shawl project. And actually, you know what, now I'm showing you it on the computer, I think the stitches do look, they are showing up quite nicely. I'll do a bit of a close up. I don't know how well you can see it, but so I've got another few repeats. You've got a lace panel and a stockinette panel, and I think I've got another couple of repeats of that whole thing to do. So the shawl's going to grow upwards, obviously, and then as far as I know, there's an applied border that goes around the edge here, and I'm really looking forward to doing the applied border, because all of this is new to me. I've never knitted a shawl, I've never done a lace, quite as big a lace project as this, and it's quite, for me, it's quite complex. Although I know how to do all of the stitches, it's just a lot of lace instructions to concentrate on at a time. So I'm using post-it notes, I'm ticking off when I've gone halfway through the chart, halfway through each little section, I tick them off. I'm using a lifeline every other row because I had to start it at the beginning. I had to start it 5 times purely because of my concentration span. Nothing to do with the pattern at all. So I'm just using a lifeline every other row, and I think the psychology of knowing you've got a lifeline in there makes you do it right, because I don't seem to have to pull it back so often. And if I do, I don't have to pull it back very far. I only have to go back 2 rows to a garter stitch row, which is great. So I'm really pleased with that, and that's going to be my, I can't even show you it around my neck because I've got needles on it. Yeah, so that's going to be my first ever shawl. And I don't know if you've got to finish it by the end of May. Maybe you have. I'm going to try, because it's a May cal. It's a spring cal throughout May, so I'm going to try and get that done by the end of May. I need to post a picture of that onto the Ravelry thread. And for that cal, I've met some lovely people through that particular cal. It's quite an intimate group, actually. There's a few of us on there. There's a few of us that seem to be cropping up in the chatter thread quite a lot. And one particular person, I've met a kindred spirit. She is fabulous, and I think I chatted a few times to her on Ravelry through the cal chatter thread before I even realised that she had a podcast. So I'm going to tell you about her podcast a little bit later on. But Antonella, hi! She's my shawl buddy. We're Canopy buddies, which is, Avion thinks it's hilarious. I think he thinks it's a bit geeky. I think it's brilliant. So Antonella's doing the Canopy as well, and I think that's really exciting to have somebody who's knitting the same thing as me. There are other people on there doing the Canopy shawl. A lot of people are doing the Moonlight Garden shawl, and that's another beautiful shawl. And there's a couple of bloms being knit. I don't know if anyone's doing the Selkie. I'd like to see that one knit. I'd like to knit them all anyway. I'll probably work my way through Melody's shawl patterns at some point. But anyway, yeah, so me and Antonella are Canopy buddies, which is brilliant. And it turns out that Antonella has had to start hers about the same amount of times as I have mine. Which made me feel actually a lot better, because I was feeling a bit rubbish about not being able to do it very well at first, and I really seriously didn't know whether I was going to be able to actually knit the shawl. And it's been really nice kind of messaging each other through the chatter thread and a bit through Ravelry messages as well, giving each other a little bit of support and telling each other that we've had to frog it back again yet another time. I think it's really good to have somebody, kind of a buddy, to knit the same thing with you as well, because it cheers you on a bit. So hope you're doing well with yours, Antonella. I don't know what row I'm on, because I'm on the second time round now, so I don't know how many rows there are in it altogether. I've done the second pass of chart A, so I've done chart A, chart B, the stockinette, and now I've just finished the second bit of chart A. I'm just starting the second chart B. If you've done the canopy, that will make sense to you. So yeah, I think we're about similar sort of stages in our shawls, and I think we both have to really concentrate really hard on knitting them as well. So kindred spirit. And actually, having watched her podcast, we seem to like quite a lot of the same things in terms of yarn and patterns as well. So yeah, she's my friend, and we're going to do a swap. That will be my first ever swap. I've kind of been a bit shy and scared about doing swaps. I'm new to the podcast world anyway. I'm new to watching them. I'm new to doing it, and I know lots of people do swaps, sort of knitting swaps and stuff like that. But I think I've been a bit shy so far. But Antonella kind of, there was something she wanted to send me, which I'm really, really excited about. But I wanted to send her something back, so I was like, let's make it a swap. And so I'm not going to tell her what I'm sending her, but I've got a couple of little things in mind that I'm planning, and that's going to happen, well, in a little while, not too long in the future. We don't know exactly when yet, but probably in the next few weeks maybe. Hooray, exciting! My first ever swap, my first ever shawl, first shawl buddy, first swap. Brilliant. And I'll tell you the name of Antonella's podcast in a little bit. Right. Okay, so I'm gonna have to be really quick now, because it's already nearly an hour and I'm not even anywhere near halfway through. Some of this stuff I think I'm gonna have to show you next time because I've talked so much. But I'm quickly going to show you oh, hang on. Wait a minute. Is that all of my whips? Canopy, Andrea, Puerperium rug. I'm reading off my list, sorry. Yeah. Okay, I've showed you my whips. I'll just show you some new yarn. Antonella, you made me buy this. I'm blaming you. Because after I've done the shawl, I'm going to do some socks. And I think I mentioned a few weeks ago that socks was something... I showed a pair of socks in my first podcast. I've since actually frogged them because I just don't think I was ever going to finish them. And that's... I've only ever knitted a couple of pairs of socks before then, and they came out really... Like, one was the wrong side, totally bigger than the other one. They were kind of in sort of man yarn. They weren't even pretty. And... I didn't know what I was doing either. It's the first time I'd done socks, so I think if I find a really nice pattern, this is the yarn that has made me want to knit socks. Antonella showed this in her podcast a few episodes ago. I don't know which episode she showed them in actually, because I basically binge watched all of her episodes over about 2 days. So I know what was in her podcast, but I don't know whereabouts she talked about things, because I watched them all really like back to back. But she used this yarn, and I've seen Melody from By Mandarines, I think she's used this yarn for socks, and I believe Little Bobbins, Danny from Little Bobbins has used this yarn as well. And after they mentioned it on their podcast, I was like trying to find it everywhere, couldn't find it. Antonella mentioned it on her podcast, and she said the website where she got it from, which was Love Knitting, which is where I basically paused the podcast episode, went onto loveknitting.com, bought the yarn, even though I wasn't supposed to be buying yarn. Yeah, so it's Bergere de France, and it's the Goomy. That's Avion coming. Now I'm going to have to stop. I'm going to have to pause the podcast, I think. Imprim Beige is the name of the colour. So when I've done all the shawls and baby cardies, there's going to be a pair of socks knitted in that. And Antonella had knitted, I think she knitted herself a pair. She really loved them. She showed them to her grandma who was visiting from Italy, and her grandma really liked them and wanted them and asked her to. Well, Antonella didn't really want to give her the first pair of socks that she'd knitted. So Antonella's friend actually knitted her another pair in the same yarn to give to her grandma, which I think was awesome, absolutely brilliant, and a lovely little story as well. And that's what has made me want to make my own pair of socks, because the yarn's so beautiful, and I really liked that little story about Antonella's grandma wearing these in Italy. How cool is that? So yeah, that's my sock yarn. So that's a in the pipeline project. I think actually it's gone over an hour. I had some needles to show you. I had loads of other stuff to show you. But I think what I'll do is, I'll do another podcast. Rather than wait another 3 weeks, I'll do another one maybe kind of in 3 or 4 days' time. And I can show you some of the other stuff that I wanted to show you today, but have completely run out of time because I've talked so much. So quickly, I'll just tell you, Antonella's podcast is Diary of a Yarnaholic. It's absolutely brilliant. I think she's recording another podcast episode this weekend. She might be doing it at the same time as me. I don't know. So I'm really looking forward to seeing her next episode. I think it will be episode 10. I think it will be. She's got 10 or 11 episodes. And occasionally she has her friend Pina, who's absolutely fabulous as well. She's got the most wicked laugh ever. And it's really cool when they're together and they're kind of discussing their projects and showing you what they've been up to in the knitting world, in the yarny world. So that's the Diary of a Yarnaholic, if you want to check that one out. Antonella's in Canada, and she's got absolutely beautiful tasting yarn and project bags, and I just love the projects that she does, and she's really funny. So check that one out. The other one that I discovered, it's not new, a lot of people are going to know it, but it's the first time I've watched it, is the Fawn Knits. Lara, she's from Canada as well, and she's got about 30, how many have written it down? I think she's on episode 36. I've only watched a couple of her episodes because I've only just sort of discovered it, so I'm going to dip into that. I've watched a couple of her most recent episodes, and I might watch one later. I'm going to sort of dip in and work my way back and watch some of her other, sorry I can't talk, some of her other episodes as well. Again, love her taste in yarn. I really like the projects that she does. She's got really quiet, really sort of quiet mannered way, and she's just, yeah, I just really like watching her podcast. So if you haven't heard of it already, that's worth checking out as well. And she's a yarn dyer and a project bag maker. She does make some really beautiful things, so worth checking her out for that too. The film I wanted to show you, if anyone's interested in watching, it's a French film. It's got subtitles, so it's not, well, if you know French, if you can speak French, you can watch it while you're knitting. If not, probably not, because you'll have to read the subtitles, but it's called A Common Thread, is it? Yeah, it's called A Common Thread, and it's one of my favourite films ever, and it's about a young woman who is pregnant but concealing it. It's a quiet film. I don't do films where bad things happen. I hate films with violence in, or I don't like anything traumatic. So it's a really gentle, quiet, sort of slow story film about a girl living in France. She's concealing a pregnancy because she's young and single, but she goes to work for a woman called Madame Melkin, I think it is, could have got the name wrong, who's an embroiderer. And the young girl is very passionate about embroidery, so you just get some really lovely shots of some of the embroidery that they're doing, and it's just a really nice story as well. So if you fancy watching a French film with subtitles that's got a really lovely story to it, A Common Thread, one of my favourites, I recommend that. I just thought I'd get that in because I said at the beginning that I'd mention that. Welsh word. I'm rushing because I think Avion's going to come up and get me to move the Freelander, and I want to finish the podcast. Welsh word, very quickly. I thought I'd tell you the Welsh word this week for wool because it's very relevant to knitting, and that is gwlan. Okay, so the Welsh word for wool, there's your little Welsh lesson for the week, is gwlan. It's quite hard to say, but I'll write it here, and it will look very strange if you don't know any Welsh because some words in Welsh have letters next to each other that you don't find in the English language, which actually, don't know why I said that because that can be the same for a lot of languages. But there's your Welsh lesson for the week. Oh, favourite object from around the house. I'm going to do that really quickly because it's Antonella inspired. My new best buddy, my new Shawl Cal buddy. So the favourite object from around my house has been sitting in a drawer for a long time. I've had this since I was around about 6 years old, and it's a knitted object, and my dad bought it for me. My primary school at the time, or infant school, had one of those summer jumble sales, and I remember my dad took me. It was a lovely summer day, and I remember they had it in the playground with all the stalls set out. Like, you don't call them jumble sales anymore, I don't think. I think that's really old school from when we were little. But you used to have jumble sales. Maybe you do still have them, I don't know. But we went to this jumble sale, and my dad said I could choose something from the jumble sale, anything I wanted, but just one thing. So I looked around all of the stalls, and I'm pretty sure it was Mrs. Morgan, who was my teacher, who had this stall, and I chose this thing. I loved it, and it was something like 50p, and my dad bought me that, and I was so happy, and I've had it ever since, and I used to treasure this as a child. And Antonella, I think when I show you, I hope you're going to know why you've inspired me to show this. It's really retro. That's not where the inspiration comes from, but it's a squirrel. It's my retro knitted squirrel. Probably some little old lady knitted this back in the 70s. I don't even know if it was second hand or if it was new when we bought it. It could have already belonged to somebody. But it was like 50p, I think, and I love it. It's got a little tail. Yeah, it's survived all this time, I can't believe it. Anyway, the reason that it's inspired by Antonella is because she feeds her squirrels, and she's been told off by her neighbour for doing it, which is hilarious, because if I fed the squirrels here, I'd be really told off as well. But Antonella, look, it's a squirrel. I love this squirrel. I'm just going to have him forever and ever and ever and ever. So that's one of my favourite things from around my house. And if you watch Antonella's podcast, she quite often gets distracted by looking at the squirrels out the window, so maybe she'd like that. Anyway, one of my favourite things. Had him for years. I think he lasted another 20, 30, 40 odd years actually. It's very well made. Yeah, so I think I'm just checking my list. That is not everything, really, because there's a couple of things I wanted to show you. There's some yarn I haven't showed you, but that can definitely wait till next week because I'm not going to be casting on anything with it for at least a week. And I bought new needles, but I'll show you those next week. They can definitely wait. Yeah, so, yeah, I've gone over an hour as well. I was trying to keep it a bit shorter, but never mind. That's what happens when you don't podcast for 3 weeks. You have lots and lots to say when you do. So, thank you very much for watching. I hope I haven't missed out any details of things that I've told you about, but I will put, as usual, I'll put little information pop-ups here. And I don't know if I have said this before. I know I said it at the beginning of this podcast, but I do put the show notes to all of my podcasts on my blog. Which is here, and if there's anything I've showed that you sometimes it doesn't show up in very good detail, like the yarn colour or the little tiny buttons. The camera's just not good enough to show very good detail. There will be pictures either on my Ravelry. I'm pretty good at putting my projects on Ravelry, so you can just pop over there and look on the project pages of the Ravelry if there's something you want to see a bit more in detail, closer up. Or I do put pictures on my blog as well, and they're much better images than you might see on the camera. So if you want to just have a look on there. And I've reactivated the garden page because I hid it. This is on the blog. I hid it, but I've put it back on because basically it's spring. I've been doing some gardening and I realised how much I liked having my garden diary on my blog. So if you are interested in gardening, or if you want to see a little bit about my garden, I might put a few shots of where I live on there as well. I know a few people have said that they're really interested in knowing a little bit about where I live because they love Wales. So I'm kind of conscious of that as well a little bit. While I'm out and about, I'm going to try and take a few photographs of just views from the farm and some images so that you can see a little bit more about where I live, just for those who are interested. They will be on the garden pages, or sometimes it might just be on the blog, but the blog is mainly knitting, crocheting and sewing as well. So there'll only be the odd gardening picture on there. Yeah, so but there's a menu bar and it says Loop and Bar Garden. So if you do want to see pictures of the garden, the sorts of things that I like to grow, have a look on there. If you're not bothered, don't. Okay, I don't know I said it like that. Right, thanks for watching. And yeah, and I will pledge to do another podcast in definitely less than 3 weeks. I don't want to commit myself now. In a week, okay, definitely in a week, because I really want to show you my new needles and that new yarn that I haven't showed you this time around. So, and hopefully I'll have a bit more to show you on the Andrea shawl as well. So, anyway, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next Loop and Bar episode. Okay, thanks. Bye.